Hello there everyone. After a long quiet period, I've decided to break the silence by showcasing my new take on Abyss Actors. I also have this new map from Euros, which I am displaying in the hopes of making my opinions seem a little bit more legit than they actually are. With the way the meta is right now, Abyss Actors find themselves in quite a strong position, relatively speaking, for Abyss Actors, because we don't care about the grave, and we don't care about the hate being thrown at the grave for tier elements. Shifter and all the banished cards, they don't hurt too much, and the Bystials and Ishizu cards also don't really affect us. The only drawback is having a quarter of our deck milled and not really benefiting of it, but, it is what it is. It is a blind second build as usual, with 43 cards to try and offset the milling just a little bit. To start off, I'm playing 3 copies of Abyss Actor Superstar. I'm maxing out all the good Abyss Actors this format for 2 reasons. Firstly, you don't want them to all be milled into the grave, and secondly, I run Desires. There's another reason to run Superstar at 3 in this format, is because he can recycle your scripts from grave if need be, which happens quite a lot because you're going to find your scripts going to the graveyard quite a bit if you're playing against tier elements. If it wasn't for these reasons, I'd probably play 2 Superstar. We then play 3 copies of Mellow Madonna. I would run her at 3 even if the meta wasn't me having to mill my deck. She's just a really good searcher, 1 card pendulum scale. Next we play 3 copies of Curtain Raiser. He's the most famous of all the Abyss Actors. He's really good for recurring card advantage in the mid and late game, and for baiting negates early on as well. You do have to be careful when using his monster effect if you've already had a few of your Abyss scripts milled. Next we have 3 copies of Abyss Actor Wild Hope. He is just a really awesome card, does so much for the deck. I then have the 1 copy of Abyss Actor Sassy Rookie. It's a very useful one-of when going to the grind games, and just in general really. He will keep you alive when you need it most. And then I play 3 copies of Abyss Actor Comic Relief. Comic Relief is really good this meta if you open him and a lot of Abyss Actors in hand against tier elements, as you can trade a negate early on by trying to take their Rule Kalos straight off the bat, and if they don't have the crime set, you can often just steal the Rule Kalos, and then you've basically taken away their negate with the Soliak as well. Next, I play 3 copies of Abyss Actor Extras. Ironically, the extras are the best of all the actors. He'll get you whatever you need, whenever you need it as well. Then, lastly, for the Abyss Actor monsters, I play the 1 copy of Funky Comedian. This is in here to help deal with the big monsters that can't be targeted or destroyed, but he is also useful against tiers for boosting your superstar above 3,500 because their effects don't trigger when destroyed by battle. For the Abyss scripts, I'm playing 2 copies of Rise of the Abyss King. 2 right now is, I think, just about correct, as blowing things up isn't that good at the minute, as chances are you'll just start your opponent's 3rd combo in as many turns, but playing 3 is fine if you're worried about them being milled, for example, or if you see less tier elements at the events you attend, then playing 3 is also probably correct. And for the last script, I play 1 copy of Abyss Tainment. This, in my opinion, is the Abyss Actor Garnet. You have to play it, but if you open it, you're basically playing with a 5-card hand going second, which isn't great because you're playing Abyss Actors. The more turns of play that occur though, the more powerful this card becomes, and in a mill meta, having Abyss Tainment in the grind game actually does help quite a bit. For the non-Abyss Actor monsters, I play 3 copies of Bystial Magnamut, 3 copies of Druis Worm, and the 1 copy of Sarnair. I play 1 Sarnair in case I open this card, and 1 or 2 of these lets me search another name and get another body on board quickly. I'm going to spend a while here explaining why I think these shiny toys are perfect for this old deck. Firstly, these guys add so much power and disruption to the deck that I would consider them pretty much mandatory. For starters, they hit most decks in the format, even against other decks like Flunder. When they shotgun their Shifter, they start comboing, you just summon out a Bystial, and then the Barrier statue is no longer the problem that it once was. On top of that, Abyss Actors themselves barely give fodder to your opponent's Bystials, as most of them end up in the extra deck. But if you do find your Hyper Director in grave, summoning out a Bystial using him can swing the game from a loss to a win. And also, post turn 2, Hyper Director is almost always in the grave, which means even if you're not playing against a dark or light deck, your Bystials are still live in hand. Bystials also fix the problem that this deck has with just dying on the clapback due to having no interruptions, because they put a body on board and they also interrupt at the same time, so chances are if you can get at least 1 Bystial in field, you're going to survive the turn. And lastly, they're just big bodies that help OTK. Magnamut on his own can put 5k on board for you, and even though they conflict a little bit with Curtain Raiser, it's more than worth the drawback to the point where it isn't really a drawback because the Bystials are just so good. Now onto the spell cards. I'm playing 3 copies of A Lure of Darkness. This is a great card to dig into your deck for side deck cards or just combo pieces. I run 29 dark monsters in this 43 card deck, so it's basically never dead, and it isn't a plus in terms of advantage, but it just fixes so many hands that I'd say it's definitely worth it. I also play 2 copies of Pot Desires. This is a more risky option, but for the most part it is fine to use. Great as well for drawing into cards that you need. Even when it banishes what I need and I lose, I was probably losing that game anyway. I used to run Extravagance, but banishing my extra deck isn't good, as this deck does use it a surprising amount, and it also means I can just run more draw cards than simply Pot of Extravagance. I'm also on 3 copies of Lightning Storm. This is a great card in almost every match, and it can just win you games on its own, especially game 1 before siding. There is a bit of conflict here with Lightning Storm's requirement and this deck being a pendulum deck, but with so much draw potential, you normally resolve Lightning Storm before placing scales, or you just don't see it. I'm also on 1 copy of Harpy's Feather Duster. Almost every deck runs backrow these days, and Abyss Hatchers don't handle backrow so well on their own. I'm on 2 copies of Triple Tactics Talent. This can be a draw spell, it can be a steal, or it can be a shuffle back from hand. And as we're going second deck, this is basically always live. It's just an insane card for board breaking or clearing your OTK lines. Lastly, I play 2 copies of Forbidden Droplet. It's not a very popular choice at the minute, but for this deck it does serve some very useful purposes. Firstly, it gets rid of degenerate stuff like Ibli or Raz Disciple, and despite this being a tier 0 format, you will face a lot of decks that this is just kind of simply good against. But even against tier elements, this card has its place for the following reason. Not many players know Abyss Actors, so when it comes to using their Soliac, for example, they're 99% of the time probably going to target your Hyper Director, which is the correct call too, but by removing Hyper Director with Droplet, you stop the Soliac dump, you stop the Soliac effect, and you also negate a summon of their monsters while also probably negating another of their monsters. Which means that at the end of the chain, you're trading an 800 attack Link monster and a spell card for a negate of theirs, a fizzled negate, and a fusion summon. And on top of that, you get to special summon your monster and scale any actor from deck. So in terms of card advantage, that's just quite a big swing. On to the extra deck, I play 2 copies of Abyss Actor Hyper Director. I've never really found myself needing the third, and I'll probably keep him at 2 when the new support comes out as well, but he is still, like every Link 1 ever printed, amazing. I'm playing 1 copy of Nightmare Phoenix. This is just to get rid of floodgates like anti-spell. Because of the Bystials, it's now a lot easier to get 2 bodies on field before the turn even starts, so that you're ready to destroy anti-spell before even committing anything. I also play 1 copy of IP. It has good link arrows, and if you make her and then pendulum summon to both her zones from the extra deck, you can make an Avramax that's just very hard for tiers to out. Also running the 1 copy of Dark. Every deck that can run this basically does at this point. It's another reason to run the Bystials. It has good link arrows for the pendulum summoning, and it can steal some good monsters. Now for the Link 3s, I run the Blackluster Soldier, Soldier of Chaos. This is relatively easy to make and utilize fully because of our level 7s and the fact that it's only a Link 3. The bigger monsters in here are mostly for turn 4, when you've not OTK'd but you have survived and you still have monsters on board or can pendulum summon quite a lot of them back. These extra monsters will be basically what flips the game in your favour. If you can make one of these Link monsters, chances are you will win that game, as not only do you get a shiny new boss monster, you can also bring back everyone that made it happen for you, straight back from the extra deck by pendulum summoning. I then play 1 copy of Axis Code Talker. He's in here because he's just so easy to make with Dark if you steal one of their Link 2s, and we don't really get a lot of pops with him, but he just applies a ton of pressure, so it is definitely worth it. Next, I'm on 1 copy of Appaloosa. This is also for seeing out games post turn 3 onwards. She will allow you to OTK through any monster interruptions, and her link arrows will allow you to recycle almost all monsters used for her summon. And for some reason, when turn 4 does come around, I find myself having 3 monsters on board way more than I statistically should, so making these link 4s and bringing them back is quite a common occurrence. I'm also playing the 1 copy of Avramax. This is the IP target. It's very hard for some decks to out, so on his own he can be a win condition. And lastly, for the link monsters, I play 1 copy of Underworld Goddess of the Closed World. This is another powerful boss monster. Again, the amount of times I've had 3 monsters on board at the start of turn 4, normal summoned and then linked away one of my opponent's good monsters is freakishly high. I then play 1 Xyz monster. I play Wallow. Wallow is just here to help OTK and interrupt if we see a lot of Bystials. Admittedly though, I don't make him that much, so feel free to cut him for something else. Lastly, for the extra deck, I just play the 4 Super Poly targets. Now I'll show my side deck. I play the 3 copies of Spooky Dogwood. Despite being a blind second OTK deck, I still find myself needing a card for time. Some decks right now combo for about 20 minutes, and then they also combo on your turn. And at the opposite end of the spectrum, this deck can actually produce quite a few grind games as well. So usually by game 3, it is worth siding in something to boost your life points. Plus, if you have nothing better to side in, this can just buy you a turn or 2 to help sculpt your hand. But if you don't want to run a card for time, I'd suggest maybe something like Goes and Match or Evenly Matched for this slot. Next, I'm playing 3 copies of Dimension Shifter. We can still easily OTK under Shifter thanks to Bystials because you just banish your own Shifter, and you also have big attack monsters like Superstar. And with this format, the rule is that if you can run Shifter, you run Shifter. For the spells, I'm still running 3 copies of Cosmic Cyclone. This is in here because it's great for stopping Floodgates, Flunder, and Tearlaments, because even though you trade basically 1 for 1 with their trap card, which isn't usually great, clearing their Sulliak and facing only their monsters is much more favourable scenario for Abyss Actors because we can play into monsters quite well. It's just back row that hurts quite a bit. I'm also on 3 copies of Super Poly. This is basically live in every matchup thanks to Garura. I don't main it because I think it's actually quite mediocre versus Tearlaments. You basically kind of neg 1 with this deck, so it's more there for the rogue matchups and basically anything that isn't Tearlaments. Lastly, I play 3 copies of Skill Drain. This card is insane for Abyss Actors. If your opponent ever summons something bigger than 2500, which is the attack of your superstar, you can just steal it with your Comic Relief or you can pop it. So this card basically hands you the win against every deck that isn't Tearlaments right now. It shuts down Flunder, shuts down Exorcister, any other Pendulum deck it shuts down as well pretty much because there aren't a lot of scales at the minute that also pop. It's just a really good card for Abyss Actors. That rounds up the deck profile. Hopefully there is something in there that was useful for you. I will do a new video when the support for Abyss Actors comes out, but for the meantime I will be playing this because every other deck I own requires the graveyard and it isn't Tearlaments, so they're unplayable pretty much. But yeah, hope you enjoyed and I'll see you guys in the next one.